Hello and welcome. It is finally here, day 1 of the 12 days of anime, and I thought that I would start with a series that I at one point held close to my heart, even though a whole lot of people hate this series with a passion. And yes, it is Fairy Tail. Fairy Tail is actually the one series that brought me into reading manga, which is why I have to kind of add Fairy Tail onto this 12 days list. Now, originally, I actually thought Fairy Tail was really good, I thought it was probably the best of the best. At the time, of course, I hadn't really watched that many anime series and I haven't read any mangas at the time, so naturally it got a higher rating. So what I want to talk about today is, what I think is good about the series, what I think is bad about the series. I'll probably try and focus on the anime, so if you haven't read the manga, this shouldn't really be an issue. If it is, I'll be sure to warn you at the beginning of the video. Now let's start with the good parts, because there are a lot of good parts, even though there are also a lot of bad parts about this series. Now the main thing that I find to be good about this series is actually the pacing. It is really good in my opinion. It's not really slow like One Piece. It's not too fast. Like I know some series that have really fast pacing, and I'm talking really fucking fast. But Fairy Tail, it's kind of exactly where it needs to be. Another thing that I really like about Fairy Tail is, of course, its art style. The art style is one of the primary reasons why I started watching Fairy Tail and reading the manga afterwards, because I was in love with the way it looked. Even if the plot wasn't perfect, it looked beautiful, and that's kind of why I stuck with it to the very end. The main sort of message that Fairy Tail is trying to bring out is probably one thing that has a good part and a bad part. I want to talk about the bad part first, and that is actually the whole friendship aspect of this series, because that's the one thing that you'll hear from people is the bad thing, but there is actually a good side to this as well. Because you see, what Hiromashima wanted to do with Fairy Tail is to kind of show people that friendship is a powerful thing. He wants people to understand that friendship is literally magic. It is something you cannot live without, and this series is sort of the incarnation of that whole idea. Because at the very end, if they fail to finish off an opponent or something in the series, they can always depend on each other, and that's kind of where the bad part comes into a lot of people, because it becomes sort of bad writing at the same time, because people don't like it when there's no logic to a victory in a fight and stuff like that, and that's kind of the thing. Hiromashima couldn't really put a perfect balance on that, and that's why the whole friendship power-up became a bad thing. But at the very root of it, it's a very good series in my opinion. Of course, not counting the final arc in the manga, I'm not gonna spoil anything, but it took a very bad and dark turn. Now, the anime specifically has a really good part as well, which is the music. Now, every anime has its soundtrack and all of that. A lot of other series too have really good soundtracks, but one of the best soundtracks, in my opinion at least, is Fairy Tail's, because I don't know why, because it kind of gives this whole magical feel to it, and the way they place the soundtracks in the series, they just want to bring out emotion. Emotion is something that this series really knows how to handle, except for love, of course, because that's apparently non-existent. The bad parts about Fairy Tail, this is a really important one, okay, because there are some really bad parts about this series. The first one, since I started with friendship power-ups, let's continue on that. It kind of reached a point that, you have this friendship power-up, you can always depend on your friends, and they kind of turned this into a last resort too often, in my opinion. Like if it had happened once in the series, I think that would have been fine. But fact is that after they used it once, they figured, okay, we can probably use this again, we can continue on with this whole friendship power idea, because if it worked once, it's gonna have to work again, right? And that is when things kind of went down for me, because at the very beginning of the series and up until a certain point, the whole friendship power-up didn't really exist to the same extent that you would actually notice it. I don't really remember when it was introduced to the bigger extent. I would say Tenro Island, could be wrong, but Tenro Island is the first time when I really noticed it, and that was when Erza used this whole friendship power against Azuma, I believe it was. She has summoned the power of all of her friends and just won. There was really no logical explanation as to why she could do that or anything like that. And after that point, it just sort of continued. Like you have it in the Grand Magic games, you have it in Tartaros, you have it in, well, whatever arcs come in the manga. Now, the last thing that I want to mention is actually the fact that there is no proper romance in the series, and that's something that bothers me a lot. Because, in a shonen, you typically have romance to some extent at the very end. I mean, yes, there is some romance in Fairy Tail, but there is so little of it that it's not not even worth mentioning. Like, you have ships, but ships doesn't necessarily equal romance. There's a very fine line between shipping and romance, because in shipping, that's just a fan or a couple of fans, you know, thinking that people should end up together because there was some connection, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it was a romantic link between them. You know, it could just have been them smiling at each other and someone thought, all right, I'll ship these people, and it started trending, and yeah, you know, it ended up becoming a ship. But proper romance, that is something that Fairy Tail lacks a lot. Like, you have this one confirmed couple, which is of course Bisca and whatever that cowboy is called. That's probably the one couple that's been properly confirmed during the series run. I mean, of course there are other couples than that, but they either were already a couple or it happened off screen or something, you know, whatever. Something you don't really know about. I think the series would have been a lot better if there was more of a noticeable romance element to the whole series. Like, let's say Lucy and Natsu, for instance, have some proper connection going on, you know, have it build up in a more developed fashion, because there is really no development between these two other than the fact that they're friends and Natsu wants to protect his guildmates. There's nothing specifically between him and Lucy, and that's one thing that I find to be a problem, because they are the main characters, and main characters typically end up with someone. So there should, at least even by the end of the anime right now, there should be some sort of solid link between him and Lucy or someone else, but let's say Lucy for instance, because Lucy is the one people are actually shipping Natsu with, or Lizana, but that's a minority, let's just say that. So the last thing that I want to talk about for today's topic is of course the anime that's coming out in 2018. Despite all of the bad things that I've been saying, I've also been saying a lot of good things of course, but I am going to be watching this anime. However, I do hope that we're going to be getting some changes, because there were a few things in the final arc, even in the first arc I would say, that needs some minor changes, maybe some major ones even. You know, they can't change whatever they want, of course, you know, there are some rules they need to stick to, because you know, every fight and whatever needs to have the same outcome, but having better explanations, you know, maybe backstory where there wasn't any backstory, things like that. That's something that I would love to see when the anime actually comes out and shows these last arcs that we've been waiting for a long time. Well, at least if you're a fan of Fairy Tail. Whether I'll be reviewing it or not, can't really tell at this time, but you know, if I do, then that's going to be something that I do for only as long as I enjoy the series, because I really don't know if I'm going to be enjoying the 2018 series, since I already know what's gonna happen, and I know there are some good things but also some really bad things going. So if anything, this video, if you're not reading the manga, it could lower your expectations of the 2018 series, and I would say don't go in with too high expectations, because you will be disappointed, I'm telling you. Anyway, this will be the end of day 1 of 12 days of anime. I hope you liked it. Be sure to leave a comment down below to let me know what you think about this video and what you think about Fairy Tail. And if you did, be sure to Detroit smash that like button if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you're new to my channel. This has been your favorite host, Perm, and I will see you next time.